In this session together, I'd like to talk about what may be the spiritual implications of some of the things we've been saying. I think and hope that we may have already caught some of the spiritual implications of our time together, because the importance of relationships have to do a great deal with spiritual implications. But I want to talk about, during middle childhood, the spiritual taking on real meaning as it's seen irrelevant or undeserving of one's real attention, or else it's seen as very meaningful and a commitment that is significant in the life, particularly of parents and those close to the child. And so what the child comes to believe and understand when it comes to spiritual things is very dependent, of course, upon what the child has seen, what the child has heard, and what the child has been told, the parent's sincerity, which the child somehow can see through very, very clearly, whether this is actual fact in the life of the parent or not. Teachers, as the child has had teachers, and these models become awfully significant in the life of the child. The respect which is shown by parents for others or parents for God, and the tone of voice which parents have, all have spiritual connotations. Also, we talk some about reading material in the home, particularly as the parent reads to the child and the child has reading material. It's interesting that the middle childhood child is a person who many times likes to have their own magazine, for instance. I remember a child, middle childhood, saying that recently. I wish I had my own magazine. Well, that's a good opportunity for a parent to somehow furnish that child with one's own material, which is very available today. The seriousness of parents and life and witness, the importance of Scripture and prayer in the life of the family. What does it say, for instance, if only mother prays? What does it say if only mother reads the Scripture? And so father, or both parents, really, we're talking about having the Scripture as important in their lives and taking that seriously. The way love is modeled, of course, because this is the great invitation stage. And the child is always looking for the modeling of that kind of thing, even though the child may not say it in those words or be conscious of it, yet the child is noticing what is being modeled all the time. The seriousness, I say, of parents, the happiness which parents demonstrate in their own relationships, or how parents are relating to neighbors and others, has tremendous implications for the spiritual life of the child. The child sees all of this in the fabric of family life. I remember one father speaking to me in a counseling session. He spoke of his 11-year-old son, with whom he felt, for the moment at least, he had a broken relationship because of the way he had responded to him. And I suggested to this father, why don't you go to your son and ask your son's forgiveness and see what happens? He did that. He reported back later that his 11-year-old son, after he had asked forgiveness for what he had said or done, his 11-year-old son came and threw his arms around him and he said, "Dad, I really love you." That kind of experience certainly has spiritual implications when it comes to how that child himself will go and ask forgiveness, or how we experience forgiveness in broken relationships in life. And so these kinds of experiences have what we call spiritual implications in all our relationships. I'd like to come next to something which I found at times develops quite a little conversation in parent-child retreats, and may raise questions in your mind, but let me discuss them with you because I found them significant, not only in children, but also in how later on we relate even to spouses. I call them the circle of identity, adequacy, and worth. All of us are in search of identity. All of us need a sense of adequacy, and all of us certainly need a sense of worth. Are we worth something? And the way I've done that is to make three circles. One, I put identity. The next, adequacy, and then worth. Now, who am I? And what kind of person am I? That has to do with our identity. Do I feel good about being a woman? Or do I feel good about being a man? Has wrapped up in our identity. And our sense of identity, they tell us, comes primarily from the opposite sex parent. That is the expectancy which a mother has upon her son, or the way she treats him as a young man, the way in which she talks to him as he's growing up, gives him a sense of identity, and it's striking that that comes primarily from the opposite sex parent. In the book, The Blessing, Gary Smalley and John Trent, he says that these women's achievements in life were directly related to the level of their father's expectations and acceptance of their daughters. Now, another one, and this may not be in every point a good illustration, and yet I'm led to it time and again, and that is the Kennedy family. And every family has its weaknesses, as that one did also. But when you think of Rose and her influence upon that Kennedy family, you haven't heard much about the dad, you know, in the rearing of those children. Yet, it's very, very clear from what I read that she had definite expectations for each of those sons. And regardless of what view we may take in their political arena and the like, yet we know that they knew what their expectations were. They made a contribution in a real way. So, how do we get that? Well, here's a young man loved uniquely, distinct personality, warm and caring relationship on the part particularly of the opposite sex parent is where a person gets their primary sense of identity. That relationship which is clear and constant, or where a mother supports and expresses admiration for the dad, has a tremendous implication when it comes how that young man will also feel a sense of identity. The father, as he loves and expresses appreciation for the mother, will have a lot to do how that young man later on will relate to his wife, even his spouse later on. And so it's so strong, in fact, that I tell young people when I talk to them about dating, courtship, and the like, I say this: young man, you watch very carefully the young woman you're dating, how she talks about and respects her father. Because if you marry her, you'll be treated identically. And young woman, you watch very, very carefully how that young man you date loves and treats his mother. Because if you marry him, you'll be treated identically. Some time ago in Canada, after I'd said that to a large group of youth, a young man said, "Aren't there exceptions to that?" And I said, there may be, but I wouldn't count on them. Because it is amazing to me how that works out. And in counseling marriage couples at times, the thing comes through so clearly. I remember one couple in particular. I knew this couple before they were married. And when he came to me, downhearted, broken up over the fact that his wife had left him, he sat there in my living room, and finally I said to him, I said, do you remember what you said to me regarding your mother and your relationship to your mother? How you said that no person's ever going to run your life like your mother did? Yeah, I said, I know. I said, don't you see that you're doing exactly that way to your wife? You see, his wife, a very caring kind of person, very sensitive kind of person. Yet at 8 years, she said, I'm done with this marriage, because every time she'd give a little suggestion, this guy'd blow up, just like he did, you see, in his viewpoint back there at his mother. Well, when he saw that, he made such a dramatic change in the next month or so in his life that one day I talked to his wife and I said, you know, he has made a lot of change. She said, I know it, but I'm not ready to go back yet. Then I talked to her. And I said, do you see that you're treating, Davy's name was, just exactly the way you told me one time you felt toward your dad? You said your dad was very distant, cool, off to the side, you know. And she said, yeah, I thought all men are alike. I said, you're treating Davy exactly like that. And when she saw that, well, in a short time, they were back together again, and now I know for a number of years now have had a happy marriage. In fact, they've had a child since then. The ramifications of that sense of identity, I say, are significant. Now, a sense of adequacy. A sense of adequacy. Am I adequate? Am I able? Do I feel strong in my abilities? These come, they tell us primarily, and these circles overlap each other, each one, so it's not entirely. This sense of adequacy comes primarily from the same-sex parent. That is, the little girl who pulls up maybe a stool beside mother when she's baking. And mother, instead of saying, get out of my road, you know, I can do this much quicker myself, she says, you know, you're a big help to mother. You know, I really appreciate you helping me the way you do. Or like a little granddaughter said to Grandma the other day, I just love washing dishes. And I love to take things off the line after you washed them, she said. Well, somewhere along the line, I'm sure she was told that she was a big help to mother. And so that sense of adequacy is built. Or the father. You see, when the little fella wants to help along with what the father's doing, that age. I think of our son-in-law John was building something in the backyard, and Jonathan wanted to help him, of course, and he wanted to pound nails just like his dad. And so he got a block of wood out there and gave him a handful of nails, and I don't think I ever saw as many nails in about a 3-inch circle as I did on that block of wood. But to encourage him and say, yeah, you can do it too, and you're a big help to Daddy, you see. That is what builds a sense of adequacy. Some time ago we had a reunion, family reunion, brothers and sisters together, and the children also were, of course, expected along. But when my sister from Ohio arrived, and her husband and family, we said, well, where's Jerry? And then they said something that kind of startled all of us. Jerry was 12 years old. And they said, well, we left Jerry back in Ohio to bid on a tractor. He's going to a sale. He takes a lot of interest in tractors these days. And we left him at home to bid on a tractor. And we said, to bid on a tractor? They said, sure. We gave him guidance. We know what it's about and all of that. I said to myself, what a sense of adequacy that must have built in a 12-year-old fellow like Jerry. So what I'm saying is, to build a sense of adequacy, you need to trust them at times beyond what they expect, and to affirm them in the good, of course, which they're doing, particularly when they're helping along, instead of saying, get out of my way, I can do this thing quicker myself, and all of that. And so a despairing remark can work altogether the opposite as well. I think of a man, now a pastor, 40-some years old, I think, middle 40s. When I was serving in his church some time ago, he told me, you know, I've always struggled with a sense of inadequacy. My dad didn't affirm me. In fact, he compared me to my brother. He said, you can't work near as fast as your brother. And he said, I've got counseling on that thing. I know exactly what the problem is. He said, I know that I'm a careful worker. I do things exact, more perfectionist kind of person. My brother does things in a hurry, you see. I know all of that. And we're different. But he said, my father's remark when I was a young fella still leaves its imprint on me, and there are times I feel very inadequate in the work I'm doing today. Well, the third one is then a sense of worth. Am I worth anything? This comes, they tell us, equally, as near as they can tell, from both sex parents. Do I have a sense of significance? How is that developed? Well, when you treat them like a person of worth, of course, when parents say thank you, or when parents say please, or when parents say excuse me, or when you say you're sorry, you see. All of those little expressions are, among others, that tell the person you're with that you're worth something. And so when you praise, we talk to praising the child. Well, praise gives a sense of worth. When we affirm, in other words, all of us feel good in life in the things where we've been affirmed, right? All of us feel that way. Where we notice and encourage the unique gifts and traits which each child has. And again, each child is different. One of the most hurtful things is to begin comparing a child with another child, particularly within the family, and hurting the relationship and also the sense of worth. When we ask advice of our children, when we value their opinions, we give a person a sense of worth when we listen to our children. We're so inclined, particularly when children are small, they're talking off to the side, and we keep looking straight ahead or doing the thing we're doing. And we miss one of the most powerful means of communication there is by looking into our children's eyes. Sometimes our children need to pull our face over, to look into their face. And I say, children are down there where not only do they see legs go past them all day, but then when they talk to us, we keep on looking the other direction. And when we look and listen and look into their eyes, I think in these small ways we're giving them a sense of worth. When we allow them to develop in their own unique way. Our children are not all the same. Everyone's different. And to allow each one to develop in that person's particular way. I was in Iowa some time ago, and a man told me, in speaking about this sense of worth, that when he was a boy, 9 years old, his father was a farmer in the Kelowna, Iowa area, and he had painted on the barn, Amos, Graber, and Son. He said, that really gave me a sense of importance in the family when he did that kind of thing. He never said, this is my truck, this is my car. He always said, this is our car, and this is our truck. Well, you say these are little things, but yet they can become tremendously significant. A woman told me some time ago, one of the things that gave me a feeling of belonging and worth is that we never did anything, or very seldom do anything alone. When we worked in the garden, we worked together. We shared together. A lot of energy, desiring to do things together. And so we teach our children to assume responsibility, trust them with responsibility, develop attitudes of work very early in the life of the child, develop work habits when we sense their ability. And what a contrast that is to being criticized, a person uncomplimented, and in these many ways we begin to develop a sense of worth within our children. Another important thing when it comes to middle childhood is development of the conscience. In fact, we're told the most important developmental task of middle childhood is the development of the conscience. Now, the conscience, of course, is developed by the rules which the child has learned early in life. Then it's developed now during middle childhood. Yes, rules are still important, but the primary thing will be models here. Models which the child sees. Internalized control, which a child receives from parents, from friends, from family, from church, from TV, from community. These now become internalized to guide the child in the future days. It's never more important than now. We only begin, we say, to take shape in the conscience when the child is around 6. 6 to 12 become very key in that. And the child needs outside guidance and support in the development of the conscience. But what you say in instruction has less impact upon the child, carries less weight than what you do. The child wants to see models. The development of a strong conscience. Studies are clear that the family that has a warm, caring, close relationship will have a child that will develop a strong conscience. And where a child comes with a weak conscience very often is a child that comes from a cold, distant family relationship. One other thing yet, a strong conscience depends more upon the association or feelings which a child has than with the instruction which the child receives. Saying it another way like this, that here's a child that can receive all kinds of good instruction, and yet it seems as though that child goes far astray. The person says, well, what's wrong? It seems that child has received all kinds of good instruction. The question is, was the relationship one of caring and love? The way we say it also sometimes is, a child is much more conscious of the way you say things, even above the words which you say. The child is much more aware of the kind of atmosphere around than in the instruction which is given. And so the child who cannot and does not identify with significant other persons will develop a weak conscience. The child can be taught all the facts, but what are the relationships? A woman said to me some time ago in Denver, Colorado, she said, the reading of your little book so revolutionized my life that I changed my career. She said those words to me twice at a booksellers convention in Denver. And as I understand it, she changed her teaching career at one level so that she could move to this level and teach middle childhood, because she saw the effectiveness of what can happen in what we've been talking about in these sessions together. So I want to encourage you as couples who still have children in this area, how fast these years move by. And here you have a tremendous responsibility and privilege, let me say, to work at some of the things we've talked about when it comes to the last things, passing on our values. Here's your best opportunity. Take them seriously. When it talks about your last good chance to teach the facts of sex, the last good chance to be really close with your child, I want to encourage you all I can to give here a sense of worth, identity, and adequacy which the child will need in just a few years as they enter into the teen years. Each of us want children that develop a proper sense of adequacy, identity, and worth. And I hope that was stimulating enough to create some thinking in your mind that can say, here is the way we begin to work at it, at least, because they're so essential for the rest of life.